All right. So my introduction to our next guest was in learning to say her name correctly and how important it is to ask for things that you want. And so I am not going to butcher her name. I am not going to mess it up, even though I'm like 99% sure in my head I'm going to say it right, but I'm scared now. All of a sudden I'm going to say it wrong. Surabhi Veitch.
That's
Yes?
right. You nailed
Yay!
it.
I did it! I
Yep.
did it! I did it! I'm so excited. Thank you so much for coming on. We've known each other. I don't know how long now. We're like Insta friends.
Couple years,
Yeah,
like,
I feel
yeah,
like time has no meaning
yeah.
with COVID. And I'm like, oh my
COVID
god,
has like diluted everything, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're wearing anymore.
what planet are we on? I don't know. So we met just, I think, just in circles and realized that we both were doing pelvic health, and your kids are a little bit younger than mine, but we were just kind of trying to get through the pandemic and
Yeah,
navigate our way through social. But
yeah,
tell a little bit about like who you are officially,
sounds good.
and we'll go from there.
So, yeah, I think we connected and I really resonated with your messaging too, which was very empowering and kind of taking the fear out of pelvic health and postpartum and symptoms and getting people back to being active. And I really resonated with that because I had my second child during the pandemic in September
That's
2020. So he'll be
right.
2 this month.
That was fast.
So fast. And my daughter's 4. And so I am a physiotherapist. I've been a physio for now 11 years. I started working in orthopedics, sports medicine, and I got into pelvic health because I had my daughter and experienced a really challenging postpartum with leaks, prolapse, diastasis, a total identity loss and shift, mental health issues,
All the
the whole
things.
thing.
All the things.
My birth was magical. I had a beautiful home birth, unmedicated, and I was like, I did it. I succeeded. And then all the postpartum stuff hit, and I'm like, wait, what? I planned so much for
Right.
pregnancy and birth, and then like did not plan for postpartum. And I saw a pelvic physio, so I did that part. But unfortunately, it depends who you see because the messaging from her was like, do Kegels, do bridges for like
Yeah.
8 months. And I'm like, how am I going to get back to running or rock climbing or like the things that I like doing? And I never got back to it. And then I had my second child and I was like, screw this. I'm not losing myself
Yes.
again. I'm finding my identity as an athlete, as a mom, as a person who remembers myself still and isn't just pouring myself into motherhood and losing who I am. And so I did that over the pandemic and it has been incredible. I started my business, the passionate physio, because I want to support moms who are in the same stage as I am, who need help getting active, remembering who they are as a mom and athlete. I work with a lot of recreational athletes who it's really easy for recreational athletes to give up their athleticism because they're not
Yes.
competing. And it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, those intramural soccer games, they're not a priority right now. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
those bike rides, not a priority. I'll get back to it at some point. And then years goes by and you realize it's so much harder to get back to things when you've let it go for so long.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
so that's kind of how I got into what I do.
That's awesome. So, I mean, this perfect segue into like, where do we lose moms in the fourth trimester? Because I mean, my experience was very similar to you. I mean, I was in pelvic health before, but as all pelvic health therapists, we did ortho first, right?
Exactly, which
And
I
we
think is
Nordic
a good thing.
skied, right?
And we both
I went-
cross country skied, yeah, exactly, and
That's
so,
what.
like, we were strong. It wasn't like we were weak
Yes,
going into birth.
exactly. So, like,
Yeah.
we go into pregnancy and we want to do all the right things and we get it all planned out. And some of us are kind of stupid and laminate our birth plans and it didn't exactly go to plan. Not saying who that is. But then, like, we start these basic programs, but kind of get stuck in it. So, like, where do we lose moms? Where do we lose that intention to get back or to find themselves again? Like, how do we kind of tap into that?
I actually encourage moms to start as early as possible postpartum. I know that there's this push, let it rest, let it recover. But the thing is, moms are active from week 1 postpartum. They're lifting,
Yeah.
carrying their babies, carrying strollers. And if we're not supporting them through that, they learn how to do it in their own way with breath holding, with maybe poor pressure management strategies where they're putting more stress on their pelvic floor or their healing abs. I would rather support you from the beginning if you're ready. And because I work virtually, it's really easy for moms to gain that support right from the
Yes.
get-go. And
Yep.
I think that has been the biggest thing is improving accessibility to support early on in the
Totally.
postpartum phase where the mom doesn't have to arrange for childcare, arrange for this, make it to the appointment only to find her baby has a diaper blowout and you're like, you miss the whole idea of like self-care at that point.
Yeah.
And I also like to give them small wins early on. So it's not just,
Yes.
oh, let's do this boring stuff forever. I'm giving them wins from the beginning, teaching them how to lift, carry with ease right from the first session on. So they want to do it. They're more motivated. I hear from so many people, oh, I did pelvic physio, but I got bored of doing my Kegels, so I stopped. And I'm
Right.
like, I would too. I stopped too
Totally.
because it's extremely boring and
Yes.
not functional. And so really building into functional exercise. So, I'll say when you're playing with your babies on the floor, when you're instead of staring at your baby, get down over them, do some cat cows, do some bird dogs, do some
Yep.
squats with your baby when they don't want to be put down. Like I had a daughter who refused to be put down unless and she wanted to be walked for every nap. So I'm like, I wish back then I even thought to do stroller exercises. So now when I had my
Right.
second, I would be pushing the stroller and I would stop at every red light or every traffic light and do some squats or do some hip swings just to even improve my mobility, improve my intentional movement and kind of self-awareness, checking in with my body. How am I feeling? It's too easy to get bogged down with like baby care and forget ourselves. And
Yes.
I really
Yes.
think that if we build in these habits early on, it makes their entire motherhood journey easier. Like one of my clients was like, I feel ready to rock motherhood. Like I feel
Yes.
so much stronger and better because the work that I'm doing with my clients is not just physical. There's a lot of coaching behind it, like kind of that
There's so
strategy and mental
much.
health
Yes.
and like self-compassion. All of those things are
Yeah.
things we talk about because moms need that. And I find that
Yeah.
as physios, sometimes we're so focused on like
Yeah.
the pelvis and we
Right.
ignore that the person is a human being
Yeah.
first with
But
the pelvis.
starting that conversation early on, I think is so incredibly important. And, my experiences were very different. My oldest 3-day induction, we were in the hospital for a week. It was just not like it was a shit show, I'll be honest. And then so like the idea of moving, I knew I needed to, but it was horrifying.
Yep.
And I was like, "Oh my God, if I can just get out of the house and walk a half a block down the street." And like you cannot bridge the gap between those tiny little things and who I used to be. Like you
Yeah.
just get lost.
Yeah.
I think another place that it's really easy to get lost. We here in the States, just for reference, you're in Ontario, in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Um, so we in the States, moms tend to go back, I would say between 8 to 12 weeks postpartum. And I think moms do a reason, like if they're going to do a decent job, they do a good job up until that point. And then once they go to back to work, like
It's
they're like,
incredibly
oh,
hard.
well, I'll get to it. I'll get back to my routine. And then they never do. So I love that you talk about kind of, making it functional, moving them on from the basic stuff, but then also like the logistics piece of it.
The logistics is key, right? Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to get in movement during your workday?
Yeah.
Because if you can get your exercises in then you can go
Yes.
home, pick up your kid, and be with your family.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be 8 p.m. exhausted trying to fit in movement,
No.
right?
And
It's
and
it's
and
not
it's a
reasonable.
setup.
Yeah,
Totally it's a setup. You're like, well, I didn't do that before pregnancy. What makes me think I'm going to do it now?
exactly.
I spend so much time. Have you ever read Atomic Habits?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Um, James Clear is coming on the podcast.
No way. That's
Yes.
huge. How did you make that happen? Oh my gosh.
That's another story. So, and I don't remember when this is airing. So I think he's coming on after. I think he's our finale this year. But anyway,
Amazing.
I use that book so much where we talk about like habit stacking, like how do you set yourself up so that you get up, you go pee, you go get the baby who's crying, you feed the baby, you put the baby down, you go immediately to the mat downstairs in the corner, you start your
Yeah.
exercises. If the baby's crying again, your husband knows to go get the baby. Like
Yeah.
you do not set yourself up to fail. And I
Exactly.
wish I wish I'd had myself back then.
Honestly, that's how I feel. I'm like, all of this advice that I'm giving you, nobody told me to tell people this. It's
No.
from our experience as mothers, right? And like, yes, we're using our training as physios, and like, we're both pregnancy and postpartum athleticism coaches, so we're using that experience. But honestly, it wasn't until I became a mom that I realized
Mm-mm.
it's not that we don't care or we don't want to do it. It's just that it's really hard to make it work, and we need different strategies, especially when
Yeah.
your kids are young and you can't be away from them for too long, and you're exhausted. Like you
Yes.
might be sleep
How
deprived. How are you going to make it happen? I'm not
how
going to get you waking up
relieved.
at 4 a.m. to do it.
Right.
You know,
It's just not
like
well, and that's the thing too, I ask people too, and I think at first They're like, well, why are you asking me these questions? Because if they've gone to see anybody else before, you just hand them a list full of exercise and say, do it. I'm like, no, part of my job is to help figure out one, like, how little do you have to do so no one dies? Like, top 2,
Yes.
3 exercises. And then if you can't get to them, bring it back to me so I can help you figure this out. Like, it's one of those things that, like, I will sit down with you and by the minute we will work this out, because I can give you the most perfect program, but if we can't figure out how to integrate it, then it's not doing either of us any good. But I don't know that, to your point, I think that always the concern, well, can I bill for that? Or, is that physical therapy? I'm like, that's human care. That's like
It is.
caring for another
It's like
person.
it's like basic, because it's behavior change cannot
Yes.
happen if people
You can't.
no, you cannot change behavior
Mm-mm.
and change habits if you don't even know what the first of all, I like that you brought that up, because you gotta get to know the person in front of
Yes.
you. And like, our assessments probably are a lot of talking, because I want to get to know them. So
Yes.
I understand what their days look like, how many kids they have in their home, what's their layout like, are they working from home still, what tools do they have accessible. And I always ask them, I'm like, will this be feasible in your day? Like, will this work? And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, this will totally work. Or if they're like,
Right.
and I'm like, let's make it so simple that you will
Yes.
win every day.
Cracks me up. You ask moms, you're like, well, how much time do you have? And if it's a newer mom and they're kind of out of the dark, they're like, oh, well, I have 30 or 40 minutes. I'm like, bullshit. No, you don't.
No way. I know. I have moms like, I
I'm
want
like,
to work out
no, no,
5 days
no,
a week. I'm like,
no, you don't. Like,
no.
let's just be upfront. Like, I mean, there's a small fraction of you, and I see you. Like, I'm not you, but I see you. But I think when I turn on and say, okay, that's you. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell
Yeah.
me what is actually
Reasonable.
reasonable, normal, average in your house. And and I know that every single person and animal in your house, they wake up trying to foil your plan. So let's plan on them trying to foil your plan, and that becomes plan A.
Exactly. And I'm like, what's the bare minimum you have to do each week to feel good and improve?
Yes.
Do that. Like when your
Totally.
kids are sick, because like literally since my kids started childcare last year, they've
Mhm.
been sick probably like 8 out of 12 months, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah, it's the thing.
constant
Yeah.
colds, something or the other. And I'm like, if I can still take care of myself when they're sick, that's a win. If I just say, oh, I'll wait till they get better, I'll wait till this happens, I'll wait till that happens, it just never happens. And that's as a new mom, they don't know that yet. We know that because we have hindsight,
Yes.
but they don't know that yet. So I don't like to scare them, but I'm also honest and I'm like, it doesn't necessarily get easier to do it later.
Right.
You might, it actually gets busier sometimes with older kids in a different way. I
Girl.
think, yeah, I think it's actually much busier when you have older kids and they're doing activities and they have,
You wanna
they're
see my Google Calendar?
louder. Oh, I cannot even imagine. We signed up my daughter for swim classes this year. That was one activity. And I was overwhelmed. I'm like, I'm so glad they're done. We have one more class and I'm like, we're done.
But to your point though, like I do inpatient or inpatient. I
And
don't do inpatient. In person, good Lord, never did inpatient. Um, I do in person, and I have a policy. I was like, look, if somebody in your house is sick, and COVID's still here, so like if that happens, like we just switch to telehealth, because inevitably, someone's going to be sick.
definitely
And guess who has to put their stuff on the back burner every
all the
single
time. It's the mom.
freaking time?
Yeah.
It's mom.
Yeah.
And also mom tends to go down harder too, which really isn't
Yeah,
fair.
because she's sleep deprived,
Right.
she's exhausted, her immune system's down. Yeah.
Exactly. But when I send that email, but I'm like, hey, we don't have to cancel it. Just switch over to here. Here's the link. I'll see you at this time. Like, they're so appreciative, because again, like I can't even I'd run out of fingers how many times that I've had to reschedule my stuff just even in the last week, now
Yeah.
that the kids are back in school, because they've got this or they've got that. And for once to be able to be like, no, my stuff doesn't have to be rescheduled. And as working virtually, like I can do 95%, I dare say 98% of my job just like this.
Yeah.
Just
Exactly.
like this, if not better.
Yeah.
And I think I've become better in person because of doing virtual over the past however many years at this
And
point. So,
in many ways, I feel like clients listen more and they trust
yeah.
themselves more because
Yeah.
they trust themselves to do the exercises
Mhm.
because they're not having me hold them, move their bodies for them.
Yeah.
Like I remember working in clinic before, I would cue a lot manually,
Mhm.
put my hands on their hips and it's forcing me to be better at teaching. It's forcing
Mhm.
me to be more effective at teaching and
Well, you're
just
a
trust
team. You're a
routine.
team. You're not, I dictate to you, you do as I say.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most fun. I said to a client yesterday, and she looked at me like I had four heads, but she's seen other therapists, so it makes sense. And I was like, look, I don't know how this is going to play out. I was dead up front with her. I was like, this is kind of what I think is going on.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm going to give you my best guess on what to try, but I don't know for sure how your body's going to react. So you get to go play. You come back, report back, tell me what went really well, and we'll leverage the hell out of that. Tell me what didn't go well. And now I'm going to use my spidey sense to dive in a little bit deeper and take what I know and see if we can figure this out. But you don't need to be in the same room as somebody to do that. And I think that's the beauty of kind of the care that you're providing, which I love. All right. For you, it's been a hell of a couple of years.
Yeah.
Did you see
Sure has.
yourself as like, wanting to be a postpartum advocate? Did you like, what was it that you're just like, okay, I'm signing up for this. I'm going to, put myself out there on social. I'm going to speak.
So I've always been rooting for the underdog kind of person, and women, period, underdogs, moms, even more so. They're undervalued, they're overloaded, they're overwhelmed. And I noticed that even before I became a mom, but personally, I didn't really get it until I became a mom. And
Yeah.
after I had my first one, I started going to mom groups and just like informally presenting postures, tips, and people were like loving it. They're like, oh my God, I want more. And at that time, I took a 15-month mat leave and I like almost lost my mind because for me, I really enjoy what I do for work too. And I needed a better balance. So after my second, it was the pandemic. My husband was working from home. So when he was about 4 months, I started taking clients and I started my first round of my postpartum return to exercise group. It all started by just an Instagram account. And I started
That's
sharing my
crazy.
journey. And I was like, I kind of want to do this like program. I think it would be really good. And actually, it was one of my friends who she was almost a year postpartum and she had postpartum depression that she didn't know, but I knew because I had been there and I recognized all the signs.
Yeah.
And she was a athletic figure skater, like
Mhm.
master's level, national level. Like she's fantastic. And she had not returned to exercise because she had had an
Oh,
emergency C-section and her pelvic physio is giving her basic exercises. And I'm like, I need I can help her. I can help so many
yeah.
moms like her. So she was in my first round of prep and literally her life changed in 8 weeks because she had coaching and guidance and support and all these moms, we were going through it together. And at that point, I was 4 months postpartum and I'm
Oh
like,
my goodness.
I'm showing you that I am doing this with you.
Yeah.
And people were like, holy crap. Like, and I'm like, this is how I make it work. It's not pretty, it's not perfect, but
Yeah.
it's working. I'm so much stronger now than I ever was after my first child.
Right.
It's so I think I just started speaking. And as I shared more, I got more confidence sharing and I realized that my voice was needing to be heard. Sometimes you don't think, oh, everyone's talking about it. Why does my voice matter? But I have a unique lens. I'm a mom, yes. I'm a physio, yes. But I'm also an immigrant. I'm also a woman of color. I have so many experiences from my lens that people who are white skinned will never have.
Right.
And a lot of the physios, as you know, are white. A lot of
Yeah.
the people I went to school with are white. And a lot of the pelvic physios in particular are white.
Yes.
There's fewer women of color entering pelvic physiotherapy, but you're like 1/3 or 1/5 of the world is Indian, like brown, like there, the other fifth is like Chinese and Asian. So it's like, there's a lot of people who need our support
Yeah.
and they also need that. They need to know that we understand their lens. And I find that because I do virtual, it actually opens up the accessibility for a lot of moms who
Yes.
may not have felt comfortable doing an in-person visit or even leaving their homes and talking about these leaks and, pain with sex out in public with other people around in the next room. Like,
Yeah.
you're kind of feeling like you have to whisper about these things. Like they're in the comfort of their own home.
Yep.
They don't feel and even I have tons of white clients who are like, I don't want anybody doing an assessment. Like I don't want to do that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's fair. You don't need one. And so I teach them also how to do self-palpation so that they're understanding that it's their body and it's like they're the masters of their own body. And so I really do feel that if you have a story to be told, it's your duty to tell it
Yeah.
in whatever way. Some people do it through art. Some people do it through other ways. And I love talking, as you can see.
No, you don't love talking at
I don't
all.
love talking at all. But you know what? It's so funny because Instagram's like 15-second clips, right? Like you gotta be
Right.
fast. And it's a visual medium, so there's less talking, but I still use my voice in many ways in my stories, and like so many people relate to me.
I was gonna say
Even
you're incredibly relatable and approachable, and again, I mean, I think back, social media wasn't, not that I'm hugely old, but, like, my youngest is turning 9,
yeah.
and it wasn't a thing, and I cannot imagine going through this and then putting stuff out there simultaneously, and I give you so much credit because that's incredibly courageous, 1. 2, to have it with 2 kids home during a pandemic, again, more power to you, but,
I
like,
honestly, looking back on it, I'm like, I don't know how I did it.
it
And
might have been a survival sort of thing too,
I
as you're
think it
trying
was.
to find. I mean, I remember when my kids were that young and I had a community, you would meet the moms at preschool drop off and things like that, and for you guys, you didn't have that, so maybe that was, what you did, but, again, to have gone through 2 pregnancies and to, publicly navigate this, but then also navigate it with another group of women, like, that takes a lot of kahunas.
And,
Um,
like, that's what I really felt was and so and there was, like, for me too, I was like, this is a form of community, and I was connecting with
yeah,
people all across the US, all across the world who, you know, we always assume that the people in our immediate community have to be our village, and
yeah,
they may not because they may have different values. A lot of the people, women who live in my area aren't athletic. They don't wanna return to
mhm,
exercise. So I'm like, it's really nice to be able to reach a wider net or
yes,
cast a wider net, and I really do think that my biggest barrier to starting was I didn't see people like me online. I didn't see other Indian women, physios,
right,
fitness coaches online, and I was like, "Ugh," like, I don't wanna stand out and be only, like, because this is exactly what happens. I know for sure my following, my reach would be greater if I was white skinned because people would see me as more relatable. For me as a brown woman, people have to actually follow me for a bit and be like, "Oh, I do relate to her," just because,
right,
we don't have to be the same skin color. But we're so used to seeing athletes, white as the norm, as the
yeah,
standard of expertise that people don't even realize they have these biases and subconscious bias, unconscious bias. So I really do feel like it takes me a little bit longer probably to reach people,
mhm.
including other Indians, because even Indians have this
Oh,
internal
interesting.
yeah, because again, this bias is taught to all of us, not just to white people.
Yeah.
It's taught to
No,
everybody,
that's true, that's
right?
true.
So I
Yeah,
will find a lot of Indian women will reach out to me, send me DMs, but they won't necessarily go ahead with booking. And maybe they're seeing other white physios. I don't know what they're doing. But like it's possible, right?
yeah,
But I feel like it's a start because this is the first time a lot of women are like, this is the first time I've seen anybody in our culture talk about these issues, about
right,
mental health, about physical health, about pelvic floor stuff. And I'm like, hey, maybe in 10 years, I will inspire another round of people, just like
yeah,
other people before me have inspired me. And I'm like, even if I'm not directly treating other people, I think that is huge.
right,
I really value
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um,
No,
so
I
yeah.
feel like there's a couple places where, I feel like there's so much need. One, to your point, in pelvic physio, white girl here can say that, like, "Oh my god, there's so many blondes."
There
It's
really are. I'm
so
like,
bad.
I can't keep them straight, like, because there's so many and
I
they're
can't. I
and, like,
can't.
you
And
probably recognize this, but they speak from the same lens, right? Like, it's the same
well,
lens.
here's the other lens too that I think is a bit more broad, and I've been out 23 years now, 24 years. Um, when you speak from a place of knowing versus, I think about, in the years that I did pelvic health prior to having kids. I remember telling moms for like posh reasons, like, "Oh, hold your baby on the other side." If somebody freaking told me that, I would never go back. I'd be like, "You have no freaking idea what you're talking about, and why these moms didn't," and they're like, "Oh, of course, what I'm so sorry.
I know.
I'm
Sometimes you
so
just don't know.
sorry."
You just don't know.
But again, like, and but I also didn't wanna go into pelvic health right out of school, and there's so many voices now. And again, it's like double-edged sword. Like, I'm very happy that there are more conversations. I'm very happy that there's more awareness. I'm completely flabbergasted that there are, PT students that in PT school want to go into pelvic health and they know this. But I also feel like there's a bit that gets missed, one from an experience level, and then also
Absolutely.
two from understanding the actual, what it's like to navigate life with a couple of kids. I was chatting with somebody earlier today and she was talking about getting a running group together and how important it is safety wise to have women who run. And I was like, I can't. Yeah, that would be freaking amazing. I would love to have a group of running moms, but like my schedule is not the same from week to week. There's
Yeah.
no, like, I'm lucky I get to the gym twice a week. But like you wouldn't necessarily understand that
Unless you were a mom yourself.
unless you were, yeah,
Yeah.
yourself,
And
yourself.
that's totally it, right? Like, even as a person of color, you don't really get it unless you have that lens and experience. So it's
Well,
really hard for me to for somebody who doesn't have that experience to speak
yes.
that language.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. My,
absolutely.
I grew up in very well, upstate New York, like we're
Yeah,
whiter than white,
yeah,
it's vanilla up there. And went to PT school in Philadelphia, and one of my very, very first roommates was an Indian woman from New Jersey, and
yeah.
bless her heart, she was so patient with me because I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. She was so helpful. She took me to a bunch of events, and I'm like, what is going on here? And she was so helpful. And I was just so thankful because I would like drinking from the fire hose, but there's still, I can't expect her to be my teach me all things Indian. I learned a lot,
Because
but
you
like
could learn for a lifetime. Like, my husband is white
exactly.
and he's still learning, you know? We've been together
Yeah.
for how many years? Almost 10 years. So,
Yeah.
it is something that I truly believe that as I share, I realize that other people relate to my story, even if
Mhm.
they're not Indian, even if they're
Very
not
much.
immigrants.
Very much.
And I think that's part of why my practice, my kind of work is more trauma conscious too. I don't
Mhm.
even I know people sell these terms. I'm trauma
Trauma
aware,
informed. Yeah.
trauma informed. I am naturally more trauma informed because of the experiences that I've had in
Yes.
my life as, somebody who's always stood out. And I really do think that I'm actually in the process of mentoring a few women of color, especially brown women, who are physios, new grads, and
Mhm.
kind of helping them step into social media and step into
Oh,
more positions of
wow.
leadership. And I'm really excited to do that because
That's
I feel
awesome.
like it's so necessary. I wish I
Yeah.
had mentors like that. And I am so excited to kind of just uplift more people so that people
Totally.
see that there's opportunity for everyone, because there's always moms who need support and there's always
Yeah.
people who need support.
Yeah.
And the irony is I actually don't relate to moms period. Like, I actually like I was thinking about it, I'm like, I don't really like the typical mom groups. Like, I actually hate mom groups and like I dread going to these mom events because I don't just work with moms, I work with certain types of people who maybe value their independence and value their bodies and value their mental health. And um I would say that the average mom isn't there yet because society has put them into this bucket of you need to sacrifice yourself for everyone in your family.
Yeah.
And it takes them so much work to get from there to then be ready for the type of work that I do, where my clients already know that they're worth it.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of mindset coaching that I do with my clients who are in that journey to like understanding that they're worth it, especially in Indian culture where it is stereotypically the woman who is responsible for everything in the household.
I
And
see.
you've seen that modeled in your home. Like, I ask my clients, I'm like, how many of your moms exercised? How many of you saw your moms
Right.
doing these things for herself? So of course, when you're stressed, you're going to default back to what you saw in your household, which
Right.
is nothing for yourself, everything for your kids. And I'm like, we are so obsessed about signing our newborn babies up for their music classes, sensory classes. And I'm like, how about you? Right. Like, and so these conversations are just starting to happen more and more, which I'm happy about. But many, many moms are not ready to hear that yet.
You're fueling like a self-care revolution here. Like that's kind of a
Honestly,
big deal.
it's a huge deal
That's
because
kind
I
of a big
think,
deal.
I think that if you prioritize yourself care in the same way you
Yeah.
prioritize your kids, your mental health will be better. And like for me,
Oh,
mental health
totally.
wise, like I have made a huge changes in the past 4 years, fueled because of my kids. Like I have to take care of myself now, whereas before I could overwork, over
Right.
exercise, and find other ways to cope. Now I can't because I don't have free time, like all the
Right.
free time in the world. So
Right.
I have to prioritize therapy and, intentional periods of rest for myself. And I share a lot of that with my work too. And like my clients were like, this is awesome. Like I'm building in self-care right from the beginning
Well,
with
it
a
gives them
newborn.
permission. It
Yeah.
gives them permission that this is okay. And if anything, you're setting yourself up. I mean, I'm a little bit further ahead in that with my kids, but like when they get out of the house
Yes.
and you have your space again, I think that's a huge sect of women that like they waited and then they're 5, 6, 7 years out and they're like, oh my gosh, did I miss my chance? Can I not make changes? Why can't we start that conversation sooner
Yeah.
in a way that it's manageable? Not that you're going to the spa every day,
No,
although that would be
absolutely not.
great.
Yeah.
You're like, no, no,
Listen,
just like
I
a quiet,
finally got a haircut yesterday. I had like literally 7 inches of dead ends, and I'm like,
you just want to pee by yourself.
exactly. I'm like, it's totally different, and I really think that's why it's interesting because I find that moms with 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds often relate to me because they're
Hmm.
just getting to that understanding now. For some
Yeah.
reason, I got there much faster because I think I hit rock bottom faster.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't like this type of life. This is not the type of mother I want to be where I'm baking everything from scratch all the time and dedicating. I knit my daughter a blanket. I don't even know how to knit. I learned. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, I want to be that mom who knits everything and makes everything from scratch. And I'm like, no, it's actually not who I want to be at all.
I think the pandemic killed any hopes for me whatsoever. I was like, all right, can you guys can you go grab something and eat it and you will not die? Like I know my
You're like,
mom is
feed yourself,
probably
please.
like, oh my God, what have I done? Did I raise this girl? I raised you better than that. But no, it's to your point. Like, but I also think too, I mean, kind of in this season now where my oldest is in middle school, it's eh, there's so much bigger things you're trying to navigate.
That's
And
it.
if you don't care, if you are not well versed in caring for yourself, and if that is not on lock,
Yeah.
it's a lot to juggle because these are some big picture things that,
Huge.
it's not just, okay, my kids stack 3 blocks in a row. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we've got some bigger issues to
Yeah.
tackle here.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that self-care, you're not going to have that energy or that ability to care for them.
Navigate
And
that.
then you're still lost yourself.
You're so lost. And
Um,
like, I want you to like yourself as a person, as your mom,
yeah,
right? So I don't want you to forget who you are. I want you to like who you are. I want you to like your hobbies because
yeah,
like we talked about this before we started recording is like my daughter's been through some stuff this year with her daycare and
yeah.
there is no way I would have been able to handle those conversations and
Mm-mm.
stay as calm if I wasn't taking care of myself
Right,
regularly. Because
right.
old me would have flown off the handle, gotten really angry and upset and
Hmm.
emotional and like all of those things. And
Yeah,
there was still certain amounts of that, obviously emotions,
yeah,
but it was so much easier for me to show up as a calm, self-regulated adult and, you know, rather than what a lot of people are doing is they just are not able to self-regulate because there's so
yeah,
little poured into themselves. And I
yeah,
don't mean that to shame anybody if you're in that boat right now. It's knowing that you can get out of that, knowing that you have a choice to get out of
yeah,
that and to develop these strategies. And you don't have to wait till life is perfect. Like
yeah.
I have
No,
clients who
because it
have
won't be.
it won't be. I have clients with kids with special needs who have 4
Yeah,
kids, it's doable for any single person. It's
yeah,
just what strategies might work for you might be different than what
yeah,
works for that person next door.
exactly. And to your point, my son is texting me now. I think he's on his way home
Is
from
he on the
school.
school bus? So adorable.
He's like, "Hello?" I'm like, "Yes, hang him on the bus." I'm like, "Okay, thanks," because he's not patient. Yeah, first time, taking school bus home and then walking home from his drop-off point to the house, so mom has to
So
be
cute.
on point with the text here. To my point exactly, like, he
Yeah.
doesn't care.
No.
But to be able to, I think also for me too, we're at a time now where he's very conscious of, hey, I have things going on and I'm taking care of myself and I'm setting that example. I mean, I think about my mom who in retrospect I think was probably a trendsetter. Like she stayed home with all of us, there's 3 of us, and then went back to work. But I remember when I went off to college, she would go to work early in the morning. She was a teacher. She swam or she went to the gym and
Good
lifted
for her.
weights.
What? No way.
And now she's in her 70s and she goes kayaking with her friends or she does
Incredible.
yoga with her friends or things like
Yeah.
that. And I think back, I mean, she really made this huge shift. from, I mean, she was a home ec major, so very, very like patriarchal
Handsy. Yep.
family. Like
Yep.
she made our clothes. My parents built our house. So that just tells you
Wow.
how far
Yeah.
she's come. But
Yeah.
like, but what an example for me to continue to follow in.
Yeah.
It just looks incredibly different. But I look at her and like she's healthy and happy and all that stuff. And I'm like, the stone's got, you've got to lay that groundwork
You do.
early. But to your point, it's it doesn't have to be perfect. Like this done is better than perfect thing. If COVID has taught me nothing, it's been that, because if you wait for the right moment, it will not
It will
come.
never come. And even like something like, okay, I used to be like, oh, I wanted to work out Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you miss Monday, then you're like, oh, screw it. Screw Wednesday too.
Mhm.
And then it's like that all or nothing mindset, right? So now it's like, oh, I can get
Totally.
5 minutes in while
Mhm.
the pot of water is boiling. Okay, I'm doing my
Yes.
countertop push-ups. I'm doing my squats. I'm doing some mobility. It really doesn't have to be
It
putting
doesn't
on
have to be this
shiny
thing.
tights, going to
Yes.
the gym, and
Yeah.
I it's that whole piece. And it's all about representation. If we always see people showing up online, in social media, in TV, the ones who
Mhm.
work out are always dressed perfectly, have that flat stomach, so then we don't even see ourselves as able to do that. And I'm like, I think that's part of why people maybe resonate with my messaging is they're seeing me literally in whatever I'm wearing,
Yes.
just getting in my movement, and it
Yes.
doesn't have to be
Yes.
overly complicated.
Totally.
Um,
Totally. No, I think that's such a strong message is, you don't have to be in this perfect way. It doesn't have to be a perfect time. Showing up, done is better than perfect. And that's very different, I think, than how we probably initially went into this, as prospective parents. And I hope to God it keeps kind of going in that direction, because you can't, perfection is just,
will
it,
lead to
it,
failure, right? You're
it's a
always
setup.
going to fail. It's a
It's a
setup for
setup.
failure. Yeah.
It's a setup, and I joke around with parents, and, moms that are about to have kids, and I was like, again, I was the control freak that laminated my birth plan. I'm like, "You lost control the second
Second you got
you
pregnant.
conceived." Yeah, and probably even before then.
Yeah.
And so the sooner you can kind of let go of that, like, whatever you resist persists, on that sort of thing. But you've been such, I think, a lovely example, um, for women of color, but then also for just the rest of the world to be like, hey, this is me. I'm going through this. You've been so open with your experience, and so generous with, kind of what you're learning along the way. Like I just, it's been fun to watch you over the last couple of years, and I'm just so excited to see kind of where this evolves and where it goes. And you definitely owe me a cross country ski. Um,
Yes, we have to do that. I can't even believe we had such similar stories, and
there's a few people out there, Wild Matrescence, Kim,
that's right. Yeah.
she's a skier. There's a
I'm
couple other
picturing like
people.
a retreat, a cross
Yes.
country ski, like a winter retreat one year.
Yes. Yes. I think
That would be pretty
there's a
epic.
physio in Finland. She's really good too. Yeah, so we're like, if you're interested, we'll throw this together at some point, because we got nothing else to do.
We have literally nothing else going on, so we might as well plan
Exactly. We might as well just
that.
Nordic and call it a day. And if you don't know what Nordic skiing is, that'll be another podcast.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. If you guys want to find Surabhi, and did I say that right again? Please say
So
it.
yeah,
Did I say it
Surabhi.
right? Surabhi. Okay, great.
Surabhi.
I
Yep.
did. Oh,
Yep.
yay! That's twice. You can find you can find her at the Passionate Physio on Instagram. She's got one-on-one programs. She's got some group programs. And if you are anywhere in the world, you don't have to be in Canada, you can get in touch with her. Thank you so much for being on. You were just a breath of fresh air in the social media space. And just, again, I can't wait till we ski.
Me too. Thank you so much, Carrie, for having me on. I am so honored to be on your podcast. And I'm excited to see where our space evolves.
Yeah. Thanks again.
You're welcome.